Indochina The Way of the Ancient. We are flying to Indochina in the midst of the rainy season. On the day of the full moon of July, Queen Maya conceived a child who later became Prince Siddhartha. The same day, the prince left his father's palace to begin searching for the meaning of life and the way to salvation. On this day, a few years later, he gave his first sermon to the first 5 disciples. On the same day, July 19th, 2011, begins our journey, the world without visas. Our route passes through the countries of Indochina and starts in the capital of Thailand, Bangkok. For a simple and absolutely banal reason, Bangkok has the biggest airport. Therefore, it is easier to get here and tickets are much cheaper. In Bangkok, you can get a flight on more or less any major world airlines. Thailand. The exotic countries of Indochina have always attracted travelers, but it was very difficult to reach here from Europe, either by land via China or India, or by the sea around Africa and again India. Mainly traders were traveling. In the period of important geographical discoveries, the Portuguese seamen have laid a way here. In 1890, during the big round-the-world travel, Bangkok was visited by the successor of the Russian throne, future Emperor Nicholas II. At the end of the 20th century, the convergence between Russia and Thailand took place on the basis of tourism. The first 2 of my fellow travelers, Lyuba Shelkotunova and Katya Klemantieva, arrived in Bangkok almost at the same time, with a difference of half an hour. Even considering that Lyuba flew from St. Petersburg and Katya from Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk. Both of them take part for the first time in traveling within the World Without Visas project, and they are also abroad for the first time. Both were a little nervous. The majority of Thailand's residents consider themselves Buddhists. In the countries of Indochina, Buddhism is not just the official religion, but the core of all life. The religion, imported from India, has been renamed and adapted for Thailand. Prince Gautama Siddhartha from the Shakya dynasty became the founder of Buddhism. Apparently, at this child's birth, astrologers have foretold that he has 2 paths in life, either to become the great governor or a barefoot tramp. His parents, of course, wanted their child to choose the first option. For this reason, they tried to enclose him in every possible way from real life, having surrounded him with care, guardianship, and luxury. So the prince lived until the age of 29 as in a peculiar incubator, and for this reason the collision with life's realities, illness, feebleness, and death, became the strongest shock for him. The prince abandoned his wife and newborn son and went on a quest for truth, a way that will help to completely and forever get rid of sufferings. Having despaired to reach enlightenment by available methods, he discovered a way in between, a way of refusal of the extremes of asceticism and a connivance to his own demand. On this path, he reached a desirable enlightenment and at the age of about 35 became Buddha. In Thailand, Buddhism is closely interwoven with social life. Buddhist rituals accompany all important events in the life of Thais: birthdays, weddings, moving to a new apartment, funerals, opening a new business, buying a car. That's probably why Buddhism has not remained a pure doctrine and entered into the flesh and blood of the people, mixed with other doctrines and religions. From the airport, the 3 of us went to visit Anton Drianichkino, our man in Bangkok. After exercises and a light breakfast, we went with him around the non-touristic districts of Chinatown. Anton is literally in love with Bangkok's Chinatown. He could spend a few hours in a row here, just wandering aimlessly through the streets and alleys, observing the flow of life. Please use a different road. This is really one of the best places to see how people used to live and how they continue to live now, without peeking inside their houses. Here, as in many tropical countries, all life happens in the streets, not inside the house. They often sleep outdoors on the streets. Today, you won't surprise anyone with Chinatown. It exists more or less in all the major capitals of the world, but Bangkok's Chinatown is the largest in the world. Let's go on the top. Come upstairs. Is there something there? The most interesting is at the top. Thai people have a saying, to be a Thai means to be a Buddhist. Every man over 20 years old has to become a monk, just like in the neighboring countries of Indochina, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. They don't have to become monks for a lifetime, as for example in Christianity. They can plug into the monastic environment, at least temporarily, for a short time, from 7 days. But every man must do it. It is even more compulsory than the service in the Russian army. Only after receiving the monastic experience, a man can be considered a full member of society and may marry or take an important governmental position. Strictly speaking, it isn't absolutely true to call Buddhist sacral constructions temples. A wat is a complex of buildings surrounded by walls or stupas. Wat is an especially esteemed and protected place, the center of public life, both in villages and in the cities. It is the place of worshipping of gods, national religious holidays, and the center of religious training and education of the younger generation. The wat are usually constructed in commemoration of the crowning of a new king, a victory over the enemy, or for the purpose of improvement of karma. In 1782, the general Shakri, the founder of a new royal dynasty, liked the place where the fishermen's village stood. Here he constructed the royal Wat Phrakeo. Wat Phrakeo stands as a classical example for the Thai Buddhist temples, a free mixture of Buddhist and Hindu symbols, decorative effects and bright colors. Broad application of stained glass windows and ceramics are characteristic of the style. Practically all temples in the 19th and 20th centuries have been built in this style. Only 56 kilometers to the west of Bangkok, in Nakhon Pathom, there is the oldest Buddhist stupa of Thailand, Phra Pathom. The legend says that when Buddha died, his pupils were in grief and despair. His best pupil, Anand, asked the teacher if it would be possible to immortalize him. Buddha answered, "There is no need to immortalize me, but the doctrine." However, the pupils insisted. Then Buddha gave them a hint to put over his ashes, after his cremation, a small hillock of the earth. Just the same kind of mini barrows began to appear over the remains of the closest Buddha's pupils. In the rain seasons, they were quickly washed away. To protect barrows from destruction, they began to surround them with stones. They made bases and pedestals. This is how the classical form of a stupa and its separate initial elements was gradually created. From the stupa in Nakhon Pathom, we went towards Kanchanaburi by bus. We wanted to pass by the Death Road. It is famous for its battles near the Pacific Ocean during World War II. The most impressive engineering construction on this road, the bridge through the Kwai River. The labor of 60,000 Australian, American and English prisoners of war was used in its construction. By means of heroic efforts and slave labor, in October 1943, the road was completed and open for the traffic. But in 1944, the bridge on the Kwai River was destroyed by the English aviation. It was restored after the war, mainly as a memorial to those who died during its construction. If a person is familiar with Buddhist doctrine, then he knows that infliction of harm to any living beings harms is karma. And to correct karma, it is important to make good acts and affairs, including the affairs committed not only in this life, but also during the previous life cycles. As a requital for our efforts, a good reincarnation awaits us. But it will be possible to reach this goal only if in the chain of all our reincarnations, we respect the strict ethical standards ordered by Buddhism. We are leaving Bangkok, but this time not to the west, but to the south, to the coast of the Thailand Gulf. The train to Prachuap Khiri Khan leaves from the main station. We arrived in the city when it was already dark, in the peak of the heavy tropical rain. For about half an hour, it was impossible to even put our noses out from under the train station's roof. The not-so-populated city, because of the rain season, looked like it was completely dead. On the embankment at the bottom of the hill with the temple, we found an empty pavilion that looked abandoned. There, under a roof, we set our tent. From the point of view of the supporters of Theravada, the achievement of nirvana is a long and difficult process, requiring enormous efforts. This can only be done if a person is completely free from worldly occupations. It is necessary to devote the whole life to one purpose, to reach enlightenment. In other words, it is necessary to become a professional, to become a monk. It isn't possible to hope that the enlightenment will occur immediately, or at least very quickly. The enlightenment has to grow ripe, slowly but surely. After acquaintance with the monastic way of Buddhists, we returned to Bangkok. 4 more fellow travelers joining us on this trip arrived from Moscow. Yuri Sprezitsky, Sergei Chernyshev, Vitaly Melnichuk, and Viktor Lyamichev. What are your first impressions of Bangkok? The first impressions got given that they wouldn't be the last ones. Generally, it is not really hot, it is very comfortable. We feel like staying here longer, and at the same time, we want to leave from here soon. Cambodia. Cambodia, one of the most mysterious and exotic countries of Asia. In the territory of this country, in ancient times, there was one of the most powerful and advanced civilizations, the civilization of Khmers. The Empire of Khmers has reached its blossoming between the 9th to the 13th centuries AD. The city of Angkor was the capital of the empire. After the fall of the empire, under the pressure of the Thai tribes, the capital was transferred to Phnom Penh. It still remains in this city, on the bank of the Mekong River. It still remains in this city, on the bank of the Mekong River, but ruins of the ancient capital, of course, are of the greatest interest to tourists. Angkor, the most popular tourist site of all Indochina, the archaeological complex of Angkor occupies the approximate space of 320 square kilometers. The easiest way to see everything all at once is to rise in a hot air balloon. The most difficult and time-consuming way, to go around by bicycle. We have chosen an intermediate option, to pass along a standard route on a motor rickshaw. Any excursion on Angkor's temples begins with a visit to Angkor Wat. It strikes with its huge size and full symmetry to all 4 sides of the world. Even the name of the temple means the city temple, that clearly describes its scale. In fact, on the territory of 200 hectares, which is occupied by Angkor Wat, almost any medieval European city could be placed, and here is a single temple. Initially, it was devoted to the Hindu god Vishnu, the divine patron of the Empire of Khmers. The structure of Angkor Wat can be seen as a giant Hindu cosmogonic model of the universe. In the center of the entire universe is Mount Meru, the abode of all the many Hindu gods. Meru is surrounded by the waters of the oceans, which are floating continents. The boundaries are formed by ocean ridges and rocky mountains. Inside Mount Meru is hidden the phallus of Shiva. In Hinduism, it was the symbol of the life-giving force. In the 12th and 13th centuries, in Angkor, there was a peak of construction activity, coinciding with the peak of power of the Empire of Khmers. The daily program is finished. It is possible to relax, meditate, or just sit on the warm stones to relax the tired feet. Tomorrow, we will be on our way again. We go to Laos. Laos. In the countries of Indochina, for the independent travelers, there is always a temptation to give up their autonomy for a little while and to use the services of one of the many travel companies. In addition to standard tours, these companies always have a huge selection of tickets to all the popular tourist destinations. Of course, any place can be reached by public transport or by hitchhiking, but tourist buses are more convenient, faster, and cheaper. At the crossing in Nakasong town, we arrived already in complete darkness. Fortunately, the crossing as it appears also works during nighttime. We are shipped in long wooden boats with suspended motors. When we sailed away from the mooring, the way was lit only by the full moon. Neither signal lights nor beacons or borders on the waterway. Only the wide, smooth surface of the Mekong. Mekong, one of the greatest rivers of Asia and the biggest river of Indochina, extends on 4,350 kilometers, from Tibet to the South China Sea. Interestingly, the widest part of the river is not in the mouth, as usual, but near the Laotian-Cambodian border. In the rainy season, the river overflows 14 kilometers away. In the dry season, the Mekong grows shallow, and on the surface, thousands of islands and islets appear. Their exact number is difficult to calculate. The result will depend on what kind of piece of land to call an island, and some are only a stone, a rock, or a shoal. But the ancient Laotians were still able to count them, so they named the area Sipandon, which means the district of 4,000 islands. We crossed the Mekong River already for the third time in the last 2 days. And on our way to the north, practically across all Laos, we will pass near this great Asian river. The following stop, Vientiane. Across Vientiane, it is more practical to ride a bicycle instead of a motorbike. This type of transport corresponds more to the slow local lifestyle. There are relatively few attractions here, and they are all located within a few minutes leisurely drive from each other on a broad and almost empty transport road. Laotians say that the whole essence of Buddhism is presented in a summary on plates with the description of the main Buddhist virtues attached to 30 stupas, 3 human-grown high, standing at the base of the second tier of Tat Luang. However, for Laotians, Buddhism is not an abstract religious and philosophical doctrine, and is not a set of rules of morality. On one hand, they respect the Buddhist postulates and dogmas well studied at school, although not completely clear, and on the other hand, improve with its elements the deep-seating beliefs in spirits and magic. Thailand. In Thailand, the state religion is not just Buddhism, namely Theravada Buddhism. The supporters of Theravada consider themselves followers of the initial orthodox Buddhism. They try to keep the teachings of Buddha in its original form. This orthodox setting is also manifested in the architecture. There are no experiments and modernist style. All new temples and monasteries are built in full compliance with the ancient samples. In appearance, it is almost impossible to know which temple was built 500 years ago and which one was built just yesterday. But in recent years, life became so dynamic and swift as the followers of Theravada became not so orthodox anymore. Though in general they continue to adhere to classical samples, in certain places they also allow experiments with the form. The most striking example of the modernist style in the construction of Buddhist temples is the well-known White Temple, built in 1997. According to the artist, white symbolizes the purity of the Buddha. The bridge leading to the entrance of the temple symbolizes the transition through the chain of rebirth into nirvana. The outside of the temple and the bridge are decorated with sculptures, curls, and stalactites. Modern Buddhists believe that karma is more important than the comprehension of truth, paying attention only to the observance of the commandments and good deeds. The construction of monasteries, stupas, feeding of monks, and offerings to Buddha's statues. Although formally none of the Buddhists would deny the importance of meditation, the number of actually meditating monks in Buddhist monasteries is no more than in the student campuses of the Western universities. Those monks, who nevertheless want to be engaged in the not fashionable business of meditation, have to go to monasteries in which there are special meditation centers. In Buddhist meditation, there are two inseparably connected parts: samadhi, concentration, and vipassana, enlightenment. A unique technique is developed for each of them. These techniques are usually taught in the forest monasteries, in individual and group meditations. 60 kilometers before reaching Chiang Mai, we looked at one of the most famous monasteries in the province, Thawat Phra Sichom Tong Tief Viharna. Founded in the middle of the 15th century, this monastery is famous for its huge collection of bronze Buddha statues. The founder of Buddhism was an advocate of simplicity and utility. He preached that the most important thing in life is not to become attached to material things and to be engaged in your own salvation. From his point of view, the only way to achieve nirvana is to work on your own consciousness, which is stirred up by passions, and performing good deeds. He himself did not collect any values and didn't advise the monks. In the beginning, Buddhist monks had no chance to show their passion for accumulating wealth. They constantly moved from place to place, and they only owned a uniform, a staff, and a bowl for handouts. But gradually, in the process of construction of monasteries, more and more monks passed to a sedentary lifestyle. In the beginning, Buddhists had no images of Buddha, only parts of his relics, hidden deep inside the stupa. Then, as a symbol of enlightenment, they began to use the sacred tree of Bodhi. Then there were also Buddha's statues. As a rule, only a single tree can be placed on the territory of the monastery, but statues can be placed in numerous amounts. So the collecting of statues began. There was even a competition between monasteries, with almost Olympic slogans: on height, which Buddha's statue is higher; on quantity, who has more statues; which is the most original; who has a statue made from the most unconventional material. As a result, in many monasteries, there were statues made of valuable kinds of trees, non-ferrous metal, precious and semi-precious stones. Some of the visitors even tried to steal them. So it was also necessary for Buddhist monks, along with their main function, the achievement of spiritual progress, to also be engaged in protection of values, and monasteries were turned into prisons. We have once again returned to Bangkok, completing a large circle through Cambodia, Laos, and northern Thailand. For two of our traveling partners, the trip across Indochina comes to an end. Lyuba Shelkotunova and Viktor Lyamichev depart to Moscow, and the five of us go to Myanmar by plane. This country is known to many as Burma. Approximately 25 kilometers west of Moniwa are the famous Po Wing Dong caves. We are going there. Ferries depart from the central promenade. Locals, together with trunks and motorcycles, are transported on them from one coast to another. But for foreigners, there is a special ferry. Actually, they are the same wooden boats, not different from boats for locals. The only difference, only foreigners are transported by them. The Po Wing Dong caves are not created in mountains, but in big hills of soft limestone. According to archaeologists, people lived in local caves from time immemorial, since the Stone Age. The same caves were chosen by ancient hermits and saints. When Buddhism came to Burma in these caves, the first Bhikkhu Buddhists were engaged in meditation. Later appeared a cave monastery. There were so many monks that the natural caves weren't enough for everyone anymore. and new caves began to be cut down into the soft limestone, only by hand and with simple tools. It is possible to wander from cave to cave for a very long time. There is a complex system of tracks, transitions, and stone ladders. After all, here is one of the richest collections of murals and statues, not only in Myanmar and Indochina, but also throughout Southeast Asia. Myanmar. Only a small part of the Shan state is open for tourists, the triangle between Pindaya, Kalo, and Inli Lake. All who are attracted to hiking with a backpack and trekking just come here. We walk like we have escaped from prison and we try to break away from a possible pursuit. We have turned on a track off-road to go sharply down to the coast of the Inli Lake, translated from Burmese, the small lake. The boat was already waiting for us. Taking advantage of the relatively shallow depth of the Inli Lake, local residents began to build their villages right on the water. Houses are built on stilts. They make a light wooden framework, and then this construction is sheeted with bamboo-weaved mats. According to the teachings of Buddhism, in order to get rid of suffering and attain nirvana, you have to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. The first stage, a proper understanding of the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. Only after this understanding, there is a determination to limit their passions and desires for the sake of liberation from suffering and to achieve nirvana. Righteous determination leads to righteous speech, to tell the truth, not to speak evil of anyone, and not to wish evil. The righteous words generate righteous deeds. The righteous deeds lead to righteous living, not to bring harm to the living. Righteous living, a source of righteous thoughts, thoughts customized just for good. Righteous thoughts generate righteous intentions. Spirit governs the flesh and not vice versa. Righteous thoughts contribute to righteous contemplation, the ability to focus and control the inner life. Following the Noble Eightfold Path, any person will be able to find truth and attain nirvana. The path is well known and described by those who passed through it, starting with Buddha and his closest pupils. But to follow this path until the end is very difficult. Do the modern residents of Indochina manage to complete it? Retaining the former power in religious buildings and churches, today Buddhism is still in decline. In 2 weeks, we have made a full circle across Myanmar. Our travel over this country began with the bus of Motherland 2 Hotel at the airport, and on the same bus we come back here. Our flight isn't delayed, although this is a common thing here. We fly to Bangkok.